Hello, my name's Roger Watson. I'm the Editor-in-Chief of the Journal of Advanced Nursing. I'm the editor of Nursing Open, and I'm an Associate Editor of the Wiki Journal of Medicine. In this session, I want to talk to you about data sources, by which I mean places that you can get information, particularly other publications, other references, for your own research and for your own reviews. Now, there's almost a bewildering array of databases out there. If I glance up at my list in front of me, I can read out quite a few. Some of these you will be familiar with already. Medline, PubMed, those are mainly medical databases. ERIC for educational work, PsycInfo, as the name suggests, for psychological references. CINAHL, the Cumulative Index of Nursing and Allied Health Literature for nursing and allied health. Then we have Scopus, Web of Science and Google Scholar, and there's a couple of other ones that I want to mention towards the end. Now, what differentiates these databases, apart from the fact that they have slightly different subject materials in them, is that most of these are pay to view. In other words, your institution has to have a subscription in order for you to be able to access the database. However, there are some of these that don't require subscriptions, and I'll come to those later. So, for example, Medline, PubMed, ERIC, PsycInfo and the Cumulative Index of Nursing and Allied Health Literature all need institutional subscriptions. You can't just find them in Google and then log into them. However, they're fairly specialised databases. I want to look at three more generic databases, specifically Scopus, the Web of Science and Google Scholar. Now, Scopus and Web of Science both require subscriptions. Google Scholar, as you probably realise, doesn't. Google Scholar does have some disadvantages. One of them that I'll mention right up front is that, for example, in mainland China, it's not possible legally to access Google Scholar because it's on a Google-based platform, and Google refuses to share its user information, so the Chinese government blocks it. So it's a bit limiting if you're in that part of the world. So, Scopus and Web of Science. Scopus is run by the publishing company Elsevier, and it's a general database with physical sciences, health sciences and social sciences on it. It's mainly built around the journals published by Elsevier, but does include others. And of course, you should note that publishers like Elsevier and Wiley, for example, the big publishers, all have their own databases. Elsevier has the Science Direct, and Wiley has Wiley Online. They're also possible sources of information. However, again, your institution needs to have a subscription with those particular databases. So Scopus and then Web of Science is another general database covering the physical sciences, medical sciences, social sciences and almost any subject that you care to name. Web of Science was formerly the Institute for Scientific Information. It was run by Thomson Reuters and it's now maintained by Clarivate. And the Publons database, where you can have your own profile which records your publications and records your reviewing activity, uses the Web of Science as its data source. Now, both of these databases are very good. I'm going to give my personal opinion about Scopus and the Web of Science. Web of Science is definitely more comprehensive if your institution has a subscription to it. Most leading universities most certainly have a subscription to both, but I do know examples of some that don't. So Web of Science is definitely the more comprehensive database. It's bigger. Scopus is a little bit limited. Web of Science also has a much more user-friendly interface. I personally find it much easier to find information on there, and the citation information you get on Web of Science comes from the Clarivate database, which is generally considered to be the gold standard. The citation information you get on Scopus tends to be only from that database, and they can be different. I also find that Scopus can be unstable. For example, citation and Hitch index information can go up and it can go down again. I know that from watching my own page. I don't understand that, but I'm not alone in finding that. However, if you set it up properly, it's a good database, and it can be very useful for tracking your own publications and your own citations and your own H index, which is a measure of particular measure of citations of your publications. So Web of Science and Scopus are pretty comparable, really. You need a subscription through your institution, and they both give similar but slightly different information about citations. So those are the ones for which you need a subscription. Google Scholar, which is freely available, it's a Google-based platform, is also a very, very useful source of information, particularly published material. Google Scholar, of course, focuses on published material rather than just general information. And frankly, almost anything that's published online and in the public domain will be available on Google Scholar. It doesn't mean to say that you can access full copies of the material. Some people kindly put up PDFs and make them available through Google Scholar or through the databases that Google Scholar is linking into. This isn't always legitimate and sometimes breaks copyright, and really you've got to think carefully about whether you're going to use that material or not, but I'll leave that to your conscience and your decision. But just be aware that because something is freely available online, it doesn't necessarily mean to say that it's legitimately available. But Google Scholar, as I say, will include almost anything that's published online. Physical sciences, social sciences, medical and health sciences. It also includes things like published reports, court reports, sometimes PhDs, all sorts of databases. If it's online, Google Scholar will normally find it. So that's the good aspect of Google Scholar. It's free, it's almost absolutely comprehensive. However, there is no quality assurance on Google Scholar, so you cannot be certain that what you're reading is of good quality. And for example, Google Scholar is known to include some of the predatory low quality journals which you shouldn't be citing and you shouldn't be using, you shouldn't be publishing in these either. So you do have to be careful, you do have to have some knowledge of the sources that you're looking for and looking at in order to be able to judge whether you can use them or not. So that's what I mainly wanted to talk about today: Scopus, Web of Science and Google Scholar. Scopus and Web of Science comparable but require subscriptions, but they are quality assured, and Google Scholar, which is free, very, very, very comprehensive but with no quality assurance. Now there are two other important sources of information, and these are not the only sources of information, but there are two sources of information that I feel I've got to mention before I finish here. And one is the Cochran Database of Cochrane reviews. These are really the gold standard in systematic reviews, and these are freely available. They're in the public domain. The Cochran Database should probably be your first port of call for any information in any field, particularly in medicine and social sciences. It began as a medical database, but it has spread out into other areas as well. So do remember that the Cochran Database is there, and it's free to access the reports, and they're very comprehensive, and as I say, they're pretty much the gold standard. Also, mainly in health, probably not much beyond health, is the York Centre for Reviews and Dissemination. It's called the York Centre because it's supported at the University of York in the UK and funded by the National Institute for Health Research. And the reports here, which are also very good systematic reviews, they use a slightly different methodology from the Cochran Database, but they're very, very good reviews. These are also freely available to download, and in both databases the methodology for carrying out reviews is freely available if you want to conduct a review. Just remember that if you're going to do it through the auspices of the Cochran Database or the York Centre, you do have to register with them, and that does cost money and takes several steps in order to be accepted. However, the information is freely available for anyone. So that's all I want to say about data sources. There are many of them. The vast majority are ones which require a subscription. Subscriptions are usually beyond the individual pocket. You usually require your university or your institution to have some subscription to them. There are some free sources of information. The biggest one by far is Google Scholar, but as I say, we say caveat emptor, let the buyer beware. Do check the quality of what you're reading and what you're potentially going to use there. So I hope you found that useful, and thank you very much for listening.